The woman who has led the Conservative Party for the past 7 months, Candice Bergen, says she will not be seeking re-election. Now, to talk about this in more detail is our political reporter, Brian Lilley, who joins us once again from Toronto. Brian, you had a long chat with Ms. Bergen. Why is she deciding to step away from the public life?
Well, after 14 years, she thinks it's time. Now, she also wanted to make sure that she got this news out that she won't be running in the next election before the leadership vote is announced. She doesn't want that coming out and then anybody thinking that she's leaving because of whoever wins the Conservative leadership. That's going to be announced on Saturday. She says she will stay and support whoever wins the leadership. She will support the party going forward, but that after 14 years and a lot of ups, a lot of downs, and a lot of time in between, and especially these last 7 months, she says it's time to write the next chapter in her life. And look, she's had some great accomplishments from shepherding through the bill to do away with the long gun registry. She told me that one of her proudest moments was passing Bill S2, which was the bill that gave matrimonial property rights to women on the reserves. You know, a right that any woman in the rest of Canada would have. Women on reserve didn't have until 2013, and she said passing that was something that gave her great pride. And so, at this point in her life, in her career, after 14 years, she says, "Well, time for something else." She won't commit to sticking around until the next election. I think if the election doesn't come until 2025, she might bow out a little bit earlier. If the election comes earlier, she'll stay till then and then have somebody else represent Portage Lisgar.
Now, today is the last day for ballots to be counted for the CPC leadership. Last week, we were hearing it was around 50% of ballots that were cast. What are you hearing now?
So yeah, the party came out with that statement saying about 50%. Now that would be surprisingly low. They normally get 65% voter turnout, but that was before the last weekend. But then on Tuesday morning, I was told, well, no, it wasn't 50%. It was more like we were tracking towards 50%. But let me get back to you. The latest number I was given, it was 411,000 ballots cast out of the 675,000 members.
Wow.
That works out to 61%. So that's in line with historical numbers. If it was below 50%, then we might be sitting there saying, okay, lots of different scenarios could play out here depending on where that 50% came from. At 61%, I think people's perceptions of where this race is headed are probably accurate at this point, but anything can happen.
Now, we keep hearing and reading on social media, Brian, that a large number of Liberal supporters bought CPC membership so that they could specifically vote for Jean Charest and not Pierre Polliev. And these rumors are not going away. Any truth to these rumblings?
I really doubt that that's a major factor here. I know that that sprung up again over the weekend because Christy Clark, who was BC Premier and leader of the Liberal Party there, said that. Look, the Liberal Party in BC is like the UCP or the Sask Party. It's named Liberal. They're actually looking at changing their name because it doesn't reflect it. They don't match the federal Liberals at all. They're the Free Market Coalition Party who battles it out with the NDP. Gordon Campbell was the previous leader of that party before Christy Clark and previous premier. He came from the conservative side of that coalition, but Christy Clark definitely came from the Liberal side. She said she bought a membership. There's not going to be that many people. And when you look at the membership sales numbers, Pierre Poilievre said he sold 311,000 and change. Jean Charest would only say he sold tens of thousands. Patrick Brown, who's no longer in the race, sold about 150,000. There aren't enough Liberals doing that to change the outcome of this race, which most people still expect will go to Pierre Poilievre when the announcement comes on Saturday.
Brian, a number of political pundits say Pierre Poilievre could win the federal Conservative leadership on the first ballot. And as you mentioned, card-carrying members will choose the new leader on Saturday. Can anything whatsoever derail the Poilievre train?
Look, there's always a possibility. Like I said, it depends on where votes are cast. I've had some people tell me, well, Poilievre isn't as strong in Quebec or Atlantic Canada. Charest could surprise people in Ontario. When Charest put out his path to victory a few weeks ago, it was a very narrow path that required him to get 50% of the points in Ontario. That is a heavy lift. It required him to get 75% of the points in Quebec. I've had people who oppose Polliev winning tell me that, and these are people who would know, people who have run these sorts of campaigns before, they expect him to win with over 50% of the points uh, in every province on the first ballot. If he doesn't win on the first ballot, I've said from the beginning, it will depend on where he lands. The experts in this complicated system say anything below 45% becomes very difficult to win if you don't get that on the first ballot. So if he wins on the first ballot, great. If he doesn't, it depends on where he lands. We're kind of like in the movie Dumb and Dumber, where they're saying, so you're saying there's a chance. Yeah, there's a chance, might be slim, but there's a chance, an unlikely one at that.
So, Brian, let's look beyond the CPC leadership for just a moment here. You've said in the past that we could have a fall election. How's the battle really shaping up between the Trudeau Liberals and potentially a Pierre Poilievre-led Conservative Party?
Well, I think for most of the public, the idea that Poilievre's going to be the leader or is the leader is probably baked in. So I'm not going to expect any significant leadership bounce. That could happen. It hasn't for the past couple of leadership races. The polls over the weekend showed some interesting things. An Abacus data poll put the two parties tied. I think it was 32% for the Conservatives, 31% for the Liberals. That's a statistical tie. That is within the margin of error. An Ipsos poll just out today talks about the fact that Poilievre's very popular with the conservative base, but not as popular with the general public, those outside of the party who he needs to win. So you look at those two things, neither the Liberals nor the Conservatives really in a position to form a majority. They'd be battling it out for a minority. Poilievre has to find a way, if he wants to win and the next election, which he absolutely can, he's got to find a way to attract the swing voters without alienating some of the people that he's attracted who see any sort of compromise as selling out and will abandon him. It's that constant battle within the Conservatives. Do you want to be a party that is 100% principled and absolutely right on everything, but not get power? Or do you want to put a bit of water in your wine to attract the people over here who are open to voting for you, but want to see a bit of compromise? That's going to be the challenge, and that's what the polling is showing right now. Look, I've said from the beginning, in a battle between Justin Trudeau and Pierre Poilievre, either one could win. It would come down to what sort of campaign each party would run.
You wrote over the Labor Day long weekend, Brian, that you think the Liberals are trying to give Prime Minister Justin Trudeau a new look ahead of the Conservative leader being announced. What makes you say that?
Just his schedule, the different tone. After he came back from his vacation in Costa Rica, we didn't see him for 2 weeks. That's actually often good for politicians, not to be seen, not to be in the headlines. Chrétien famously hated being in the news cycle all the time because he said people don't want to see the prime minister's face all the time. Trudeau's always loved the limelight. So he takes this 2-week vacation in Costa Rica, comes back, he hosts the German chancellor. For the most part, that was not a great visit, but there are lots of photos and TV images of him out there with another world leader touring Canada. That's as much of the news as a lot of low information swing voters would get from that. Next, he's with the NATO Secretary General touring Canada again in the Arctic, at Cold Lake. Then he's dropping in unexpectedly. He drops in on Ontario Premier Doug Ford for a meeting. He asked for that meeting. Did the same thing in Manitoba with Premier Heather Stephenson. So that's kind of got me thinking about it. And then I talked to some people, looked at the rest of his calendar. He's got a lot of international events going on. He's going to be hosting the president of the European Commission here in Canada. He's going to be going to the United Nations General Assembly, the state funeral later this month for Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. All of that's going on. So yeah, I think they're trying to reframe him, which every leader, every party does every once in a while when they've been in the public eye for a bit. You got to freshen them up. I think they're trying to freshen him up and position him as a statesman up against this newcomer, Poilievre.
But what about the rumors that keep popping up saying that Trudeau may no longer lead the Liberals into the next election, that we may see somebody like Chrystia Freeland, former Bank of Canada Governor Mark Carney, or even the current Trade Minister, Francois-Philippe Champagne?
Well, I'll say this about Mark Carney. I don't think he's going to jump in. And if you want to set off all kinds of people who are convinced that there's a globalist conspiracy, then you elect Mark Carney, the former Goldman Sachs banker, former Bank of England governor, former Bank of Canada governor, as your leader. And he spent most of his career outside of Canada. They could just do what they did to Michael Ignatieff with him. I don't think it's a good choice, and I don't think Carney is a very, very smart man. I think his policies are wrong on a lot of things, but I don't think he's going to jump in. I'm continually hearing now, Hal, that Chrystia Freeland doesn't actually want it, that she may do like Candice Bergen and leave by the next election. That she's reached for the brass ring. She's deputy PM, but may want to step back after some very, very difficult and intense years. So then that leaves Francois Philippe Champagne, that leaves Melanie Joly, Anita Anand, a whole list of people. If it changes, if the Liberal leader changes, then the whole calculus of how you run a campaign, I would say, changes as well, because Champagne is very different than Trudeau. Someone like Chrystia Freeland would be tied directly to Trudeau. They've worked so closely together. Champagne could rebrand himself. Melanie Joly could perhaps rebrand herself as not being that tied to Trudeau. So it would change things dramatically, but don't go with the easy assumption that it'll be Chrystia Freeland or Mark Carney if Trudeau does step away.
A new luxury tax took effect last week, Brian. Now it's an extra 10% tax on cars and planes over $100,000 and boats over $250,000. Yeah, I wish. What was the rationale behind this tax, and what will the impact really be?
Well, the rationale is that what the Liberals always say, that the rich should pay their fair share. And the implication there is that they don't. I'd like to know what their fair share is, because I've been looking at this for years, and people will say, well, the 1% don't pay any tax. Actually, they pay about, I think the last time I checked, about 20% of all taxes, income taxes at the federal and provincial level in this country. So, you can't say they're not paying their fair share. But this is the government looking for new revenue tools, as Liberals like to call them. The Parliamentary Budget Office looked at this. They said that the tax would actually have a negative economic impact in terms of billions of dollars of lost economic activity, because people would not buy these items, or they'd buy them elsewhere outside of Canada.
Right.
And so dealerships would lose out, manufacturers would lose out. There's one boat manufacturer from the Okanagan Valley, Campion. They've closed down shop and they're headed for Texas, because they say we're tired of constantly being picked on and bombarded. The people who get hurt by that, they're not the millionaires buying the $250,000 boat. It's the guy working on the line, building the boat, the artisan, the craftsman, the tradesman, the dealerships that were selling the boats, that sort of thing. It's been a messy rollout, and I think it will hurt rather than help. But it gets the Liberals to engage in class warfare, which they definitely seem to like to do.
Now, Brian, we recently discussed the Trudeau Liberals giving $133,000 for an anti-racism program, but it turns out the guy running the campaign was a racist, allegedly. Now, the feds are promising new vetting techniques, but you say there's kind of a fresh new angle here that makes things even worse?
Yeah, it's a fellow that they picked to go on the panel to decide how the media bailout money, which is, by the way, mostly for print, it's not for broadcasters, that's another story. This $595 million, they appointed this guy who went to one of the sessions run by Leif Maruth and the Community Media Advocacy Center, and said that Canadians live in a realm of white supremacy. Wait, what a minute. Like the guy helping decide how to dole out that money believes that the entire Canadian society is run on white supremacy. We need a complete overhaul on these anti-racism programs that seem to spread more racism or wacky political ideas that are driven by far left ideology. It's not about ending racism. It's a far left ideology. We are paying for people to push their politics in these seminars, which are given to civil servants and employees that don't have a choice but to go to them. And, it's costing us a lot of money to rip at the fabric of our society rather than heal. I'll be the first to say racism exists in this country. And should the government be doing things to combat it? Yes. But what they've been doing so far is the wrong thing. And this is just the latest example.
Political reporter and Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lilley, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you, Hal.